Hello, welcome to Ask a Mortician, the internet's preeminent 19th century whale ship disaster channel. Today we're talking about walruses, whale-walrus hybrids, like whalefins, whale dolphins. Fine, walruses are not real. Whalefins are, walruses no. But there was a brief period when whalers turned their backs on whaling and focused on an almost orgiastic slaughter of Arctic walruses. To understand why this happened, a little background. The real boom era of American whaling was the early to mid-1800s. During that time, whaling ships would leave from the east coast of the US, places like Nantucket and New Bedford, and sail all the way around Cape Horn and into the Pacific Ocean. The whalers would often be away from their homes and families for years at a time. But by the mid-19th century, something strange started to happen. The whales that were so valuable, the giants of the Pacific, started to disappear. No one could explain why. Oh, they killed them all? So there were hardly any left? That is a shame. Fortunately, by the 1870s, a whole new whaling ground had been discovered. And fortunately for the whalers, instead of the warm Pacific islands, it was way up at the tippy top of the world, through the Bering Strait, in the frigidly cold conditions of what is now northern Alaska. Peter Nichols, author of the book Oil and Ice, wrote of the Arctic whaling grounds, "This was the last profitable whaling ground on Earth. The whalers had virtually exhausted the whale stocks of the Atlantic, the Pacific, Indian, Eastern Arctic, and Southern Oceans. It had taken less than 100 years. This Western Arctic whaling ground was discovered in the mid-1800s, discovered loosely or not at all here, as there were Inuit living there and whaling there. When the first harpoon was thrown, the whalers thought they had speared a humpback whale. In fact, what they were now hunting were massive bowhead whales. In relatively short order, whalers would hunt the bowheads to near extinction as well. Now that even the whales at what felt like the frozen edge of the world were gone, what's left? Walrusing. Since the late 1850s, Arctic whale ships had taken to killing walruses. With nary a bowhead whale in sight in 1859, the whale ship Cleone started killing walruses and the industry feasted. The Inuit didn't, but we'll come back to that in a moment. At first, the Arctic was lousy with walrus. They were everywhere, thousands of them. And compared to the danger of killing a whale, finding them in open water, tracking them in a little boat, stabbing them, riding the wake, giant tail flapping, etc., killing walruses was child's play. I'll spare you the gory details, but a whaler could literally just walk up to a walrus and stab it in the head. When whalers first started killing the walruses, and this hurts my heart a little bit, the curious walruses would walk right up to the men and be like, "Hey, welcome to my ice floe. Oh, what you got there?" Stab. Even at the point the other walruses were like, "Oh shit," and slid off the ice into the water to escape, it wasn't that hard to kill them in the water either. And things got even more efficient when whalers started using buffalo rifles to kill walruses. It didn't help that the whalers, most of which came from a devout Quaker background, believed that God had plonked the walruses on the ice and the whales in the waters for them. Walrus carcasses produced oil the same way whales did, and a ship's crew could kill 500 walruses and make half their oil for the season. Walruses were the new whales, and everyone was happy. Except the walruses. And the Inuit, who were slowly starving. In the early 1800s, the Inuit of Alaska and Siberia had pivoted to make walruses their main source of food, clothing, and tools. They had been forced to make this pivot because whalers had shown up and killed most of their whales. So the Inuit were like, "Fine, we'll be walrus people." But then the New England whalers, emboldened by greed and what they believed was God's plan, started taking their walruses too. Unlike the Inuit, who were far more sustainable hunters, the whalers were the new, rapacious American capitalism in action and worked fast. In 1855, they killed 3 walruses in the Arctic. By 1867, they killed 35,663 walruses. Approximately 150,000 walruses were caught between 1849 and 1914, with most of them being killed in the 1870s. John Boxtos, historian and authority of the whaling industry, said the total kill was probably more than twice the size of the catch. That is to say, they likely actually killed more like 300,000 walruses. But not every whaling captain was all aboard the walrus train. Some saw the suffering that walrusing was causing and wanted to stop, but could not or would not unless all the other whale ships agreed to do the same. They were all under pressure from whaling merchants and ship owners in New Bedford, people who didn't care about the Inuit so far away in their homes in Massachusetts. A Captain Ebenezer Nye wrote to the New Bedford Republican Standard that 1/3 of the Inuit population south of the St. Lawrence Bay, near the Bering Strait on the Chukotka Peninsula, had died. This was all because of the lack of walruses. He wrote, and warning, this gets grim here, one village of 200 inhabitants all died except one man. Mothers took their starving children to the burying grounds, stripping the clothing from their little emaciated bodies, and then strangled them, or let the intense cold end their misery. The people had eaten their walrus skin houses and walrus skin boats. They also ate about all of their dogs. There are 3 dogs left at what was once the largest settlement of Plover Bay. Another whaling captain, Captain Frederick Barker, was especially adamant about the plight of the Inuit. Barker's whale ship, the Japan, ran into the shore of the Bering Strait in late 1870. The Inuit rescued Barker and his men and brought them into their village, the chief's wife literally warming Barker's frozen feet on her naked breast, and fed them raw walrus meat. For months, the Inuit fed and shared their home with Barker and his men. Despite the distaste Barker and his crew had for the raw, often putrid walrus meat that the Inuit shared with them, they understood that the Inuit were sharing a precious resource. Said Barker, "I felt I had been taking the bread out of their mouths." Furthermore, Barker told the Republican Standard that even though the Inuit knew perfectly well it was men like him responsible for slaughtering all the walruses, quote, "still, they were ready to share all they had with us. The wholesale butchery of the walrus will surely end in the extermination of this race of natives who rely on these animals alone for their winter's supply of food." Barker and his men vowed never to take another walrus. And though Barker entreated other whalers to do the same, pointing at the misery and the potential eradication of a whole group of indigenous people, walrusing could not be stopped. And it wasn't, until there were almost no walruses left. No longer worth the trip. And whalers were right back where they started, facing down the death of their industry. Oddly, it was the near eradication of the whale and walrus population that saved them from total extinction. People stopped hunting them when they became too difficult to find and catch, allowing the populations a chance to rebound. And thus concludes another episode of Nothing Good Happens on a Whale Ship. Thank you for being here, patrons. This started off so fun. We were like, wee, walruses, so chubby, and then wham. Did you feel like the little kids who went to see Freya, Freya in the harbor? And then they were like, boom, we killed her. Meow. Yeah, that's me too.